Hey folks, Colin here from Something's Recording, and today I'm going to show you how to edit and time align your live drums. Okay, so I've got about 8 bars of live drums from a track that we recorded here at Something's Recording. They have not been edited yet. We are going to edit them together today. Now there's 2 ways you can do this. You can approach it more loosely, or you can approach it more rigidly. I'm going to be taking a more rigid approach today just to show you what is possible in terms of editing live drums. If it's something that's too rigid for you, if it's too on the grid for you, you can always lay back a little bit and leave some notes off, leave some notes more loose. This process is totally flexible for you, okay? So let's get started here. The first thing you want to do when editing a set of live drums is make a separate layer or duplicate your layer, okay? So in Studio One, we're going to highlight all the tracks here. We're going to go to Layers, and we're going to duplicate layer, okay? So what that's going to do is that's going to copy all of the drums here down to another layer. And you can see I already had them named pre-edit, so these are the pre-edited drums that are going to be saved in this layer. And now what you want to do with that is make sure that layers follow events is off, otherwise any edits you make to the top layer will also apply to the bottom layers. The reason you want to do this is because if you screw up an edit, or if you find out later down the road that you don't like your edits, you can always go back to the unedited drums and throw that back in underneath, okay? Now the main tracks I want to focus on when editing these drums is the kick and the snare. So we're going to zoom in just a little bit here, make things a little bit larger. We want to focus on the kick and the snare, okay? Because that's what we want on the grid, okay? You can see these drums are actually pretty close. There's a couple hits that are on. That one's a little early. Those are pretty early there. That one's early. You can see he starts on, gets a little early, but there's hits throughout that are still on. So you can see we have a kick on, a kick on. So if you didn't want to be so technical and really grid these drums, you could leave some of these hits. Like that one's pretty good. That one there's pretty good. It's just a little late. See, things like that you could leave if you didn't want to be too rigid and really grid these drums, okay? I'm going to be more rigid. That's usually what I do. I usually take a more gridded approach to drums. It's just what sounds better to me. A tighter track usually sounds better. But let's get started here. So before you start making any cuts or any edits, what you want to do is you want to group all your tracks so the edits apply to all the tracks. Otherwise, you could get some weird phase issues and things won't line up properly. So we're going to click the first track, click the last track, and then in Studio One to create a group, it's Command G. So we'll just name it drums, okay? Now we're going to go to our first beat here, and we're going to get to work editing here, okay? So this one here is a little bit early. So what we're going to do is we're going to go a little bit before the next beat, this snare hit here, and we're going to make a cut here, okay? So we're going to click, and then to make a cut in Studio One, it's Alt-X, okay? So we're going to cut right there. And then there's something pretty neat about Studio One when you're editing. If you hold Command and Option, you can actually move the audio of the track, okay? So we're going to hold Command, Option, and then drag this till it's on beat, okay? So this is still a looser way of editing than quantizing. Also, when you do quantizing, sometimes it can change the pitch of the audio as you stretch it, and I've never been a big fan of that, okay? So we're just dragging the underlying audio till it's closer to the grid, okay? All right, so we're going to move on to this snare here. You can see this snare is a little early, so we'll move towards the next beat, make a cut, and then we'll grab this snare and tuck it over till it's on beat. Move on here so you can see these kicks are a little bit closer, so things like this you have to be a little bit more careful about. So we'll make a cut before that kick. We'll drag this one a little closer. That kick is fine. I'm not going to touch that. I'm not going to edit everything just because I can. That snare is a little late, so we'll cut beforehand. Cut before that kick. Drag the snare back a little bit till it's on beat. That kick looks okay to me. It could come back a little bit, I guess. So we'll cut here. Tuck that back just a tad. The snare's early, these are early, so I'm going to edit all of these as a group here. So we're going to go till it's not really early anymore, and we'll pull them all forward together, okay? So that snare's not too bad, so we'll cut before that, and then we'll pull this section forward as a group, okay? So there's where we want to be. That snare's on. We'll cut here. We'll pull that kick forward. Now that kick's on. Let's make sure we didn't mess up the snare. That snare is good, so we'll cut before the snare, and we will match up these 2 kicks here. So we'll pull those forward. And then just a little bit more on this last one here, so we'll pull it forward just a touch there. That kick looks pretty good. That snare's a little bit early. These are early. Is that on? That's early. That kick is on. So we'll cut there. And then we'll drag. Snare till it's good. Is that one good? Or did we move it too far? That one's good. So we'll cut here. And we'll cut here. And we'll move these forward. That one's good. The one before it's still late, so we'll pull this forward. And you can see I'm using the actual cursor here to match up to the line. And then I just drag it till the underlying audio matches that line. That kick looks good. That snare's good. These are early. That's early. That's a little early. That snare is late. So we'll cut beforehand there. And now the smallest move we have to make is this kick here. So we'll match that kick up. And then we will cut before that kick. We'll pull that snare a little bit more. So you see when we're pulling this snare forward, we're making this kick a little late. So this is going to be one of the challenges of editing these closer hits together. So we're going to click. We're going to cut just before the end here. And just before there. We'll see if we can nudge this back a little bit. That's good. Now let's make sure we didn't pull it too far. Looks good to me. That kick can come forward just a touch. So that's our first 4 bars here. I'm going to go through the next 4 bars and then we will reconvene and we'll finish up this video, okay? Okay, so we've got all of our edits done here. I've got all of my cuts made. The next thing you want to do is you want to add your crossfades, okay? So we're going to zoom out here just a touch. I'm going to highlight everything. And then I'm going to press X. So in Studio One to add crossfades, you just press X. So now what we have to do is we have to go through and listen and make sure the crossfades are all in the right place. We have to make sure we don't hear any pops or any overlaps, okay? So let's take a listen here. Heard a little blip there, not sure. That's just the kick. Okay, so everything seems good. Just a couple notes to make here about the toms at the end. So you see there's this tom fill rolling in. A lot of the times with good drummers, when you line the kick and snare like this, the toms will just fall into place, okay? So you can see they're a little off here, but that's not our main concern. You want the tom rolls to be a little bit more free. Tom rolls you don't really have to put on the grid. They sound better when they're more freehand, okay? So take a listen to that roll by itself. Okay? Still sounds good even though it's not completely on the grid. So now that we have all of our crossfades in and everything's sounding good, we're gonna highlight everything one more time and then we're just gonna bounce this so it's one final track. But beforehand, before I forget to, we're gonna make one more layer, all right? So we're gonna duplicate this edited layer and we're gonna call it edit. This way, after we bounce it to one final track, if we do have any things we want to change, if there's an edit that slipped past us when we listened, we can always switch back to the edited layer, tweak it, and then rebounce it, okay? So final thing to finish everything off here, let me add one final fade though, since this is a rigid end here. So we'll just highlight the ending here, put a little fade in. All right, we'll highlight everything. And then in Studio One, you want to merge all the events, so that'll merge all the crossfades together. We'll make sure it's on the grid here, and then Command B will bounce it to a finished track, okay? So let's take a listen to our finished drums here on the loop, okay? Here we go. So here are the gridded drums. So that's it. That's a simple way you can go through and edit your drums by hand if you prefer doing it by hand rather than using quantizing. To me, quantizing just sounds a little bit more mechanical and it stretches the audio as opposed to moving it, and I've never been a fan of the pitch change that happens when you stretch audio like that. So this is a simple way you can do it by hand. in Studio One and still get your drums gridded. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. And if you do need your drums edited, don't hesitate to reach out. I'll see you guys soon.